How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is Deck Ready, my channel all about Steam hardware. And in today's video, we're going to break down the interview that Valve did with IGN when they announced the release date of the Steam controller. They talked about the controller, of course, but they also talked about the Steam Machine and Steam Frame, and they even mentioned the Steam Deck too. So just like I did back when my friend Jake Baldino interviewed them on his podcast Friends Per Second, I'm going to play some clips and then I'm going to respond to them in the video. Subscribe to the channel, set your notifications to all, follow me on Twitter at Deck_Ready, but let's just roll into it with the first clip, which is how they got to the $99 price.
Yeah, a lot of it was discipline around what we include and don't include. We kind of had one of these guiding principles that we wanted it to have input parity with the Steam Deck for the most part. People are taking the Steam Deck and then playing their Steam Deck and then going to the controller. We want it to feel really familiar. That helped us keep things pretty even keel on like not throwing in a whole bunch of things that would add costs. But on top of that, there's a lot of thoughtful engineering and design that goes into it to make sure that we're delivering the best possible value at the price point we're delivering to give people just a lot of different opportunities.
I don't know how much they needed to explain this, because when you look at the controller, it literally looks like they took the Steam Deck and cut the screen out and then mashed the two halves together. Of course, there are new parts in it, like these updated joysticks that are called TMR, I'm pretty sure. They're like an evolved version of Hall effect sensors. Basically, they won't get stick drift and they'll be super accurate and latency free. They also updated the trackpads a little bit, and when it comes to those, I am a trackpad lover. I use the trackpads all the time in games and in desktop modes. I know that there's like two camps. You're either like me or you're someone who literally never uses the trackpads. If you need to do something in desktop mode, I know a lot of people use a wireless keyboard and mouse. If you learn the trackpads, they're really useful and really easy. The thing that made them click for me is that they're radial and not up and down. So when you're scrolling, they work better if you move your thumbs in a circle. And once I figured that out, everything clicked. And the learning curve on figuring out the split keyboard, once I got over those two small hurdles, I just started using the trackpads more naturally. I know it's not going to be enough to convince some people to use them, but I think if you put the effort in, it's worth learning how to use the trackpads. And when it comes to the price, I think $99 is exactly where it should be. I said that in the last video. I still feel that way. Like, honestly, most of the parts in it are just Steam Deck parts being repurposed with a few new ones. So like, you can see how they got to 99 bucks. So I'm glad they hit that price point, because I feel like anything over $100, that's when you're getting into the too expensive territory. But when you compare it to something like the DualSense or the Xbox Elite controllers or the DualSense Edge, it's right in the mix there. There's no standardized controller price, unfortunately. The standard up until now was that it cost as much as a game, and that's how it launched this generation, with the DualSense being $70. But of course, the regular DualSense is $75. The special edition ones are $85, and then the Edge is between $150 and $200, whether or not you get the regular or special edition one. So $100 seems just fine. The next thing they covered is whether or not this controller is going to work on consoles like the Xbox Series X and S, the PS5, or the Switch 2.
Yeah, that was not really a goal for us, because those controllers, or at least those platforms, that they have a pretty fixed expectation of what they consider to be a controller, right? Like if you're an Xbox or a PlayStation licensed controller, you have a very specific set of controls and a very specific API that you're using to communicate with games. And because we have those extra features, those APIs in a sense don't really let you express the full potential of the Steam controller. And so for us, yeah, it's very much intended to be paired with Steam or other client applications that talk to Steam, like Remote Play on your mobile devices, or from a thin client, smart TV, those kinds of things, if you don't have a full PC running Steam. That being said, we have done a lot of work to make sure that you can add any third-party app that you're using outside of Steam to Steam, so that you can benefit from that whole layer of configuration, so that you can just add your games to Steam and still use the controller to its full potential. On platforms where Steam's not running, like you mentioned, some consoles and other types of PCs and non-PC devices, we have a baseline level of functionality where the controller acts as a kind of a mouse and keyboard, right? So you can use that to get through your BIOS screens, or like get through whatever you need. But at the end of the day, the core experience is is intended for using with Steam.
I'm not shocked that it's a flat out no, because Steam input is so heavily ingrained in how these controllers work. There's a lot of API stuff going on that the consoles just don't have. And honestly, most of these consoles that come out, like the Switch 2 and the PS5, they're built around the controller because the consoles themselves are so similar. Making a custom controller is a really easy way to differentiate yourself. Like the Switch 2 has the Joy-Cons that have the HD rumble, the bigger sticks, blah, blah, blah. They can snap on and off of the console with magnets. I think that's pretty cool. Then if you look at the DualSense, you get the haptic feedback, you get the adaptive triggers, you get the touchpad. So they've all got their own identity when it comes to their controllers. So putting in extra work to make the Steam controller work with those devices, I don't know how many of them they'd even sell. Like, this is very clearly aimed at the PC audience, and I'm glad that they kept them in mind first and foremost when they were developing the controller. But they did confirm, as you just heard, that if you plug this thing in without having Steam open, it'll have basic keyboard and mouse functionality built in. So if you just want a quick and dirty way to interact with your PC, to do something on the TV or at your desktop or in the field, like if you have a laptop or something like that, it's going to be that solution for you. So like, this could be usable by just average people who use their PC out in the field. And I think that's awesome. It's going to be cool to have a dedicated PC controller. Like even the 8BitDo Ultimate 2, which is kind of serving that purpose already for me, that's made for phones, it's made for consoles, it's made for the Switch 2, it's made for PCs. This controller is built from the ground up for PCs, and we've needed that for a long time. I know the original Steam controller has its diehards. I got it when it went on fire sale. I've tried so many times to wrap my head around how that controller works, and while I did figure it out, it was never something I reached for instinctively, whereas this, it's just a Steam Deck without the screen. I will be reaching for it instinctively. So good job, Valve, on that one. So that wraps up the short section about the Steam controller. I'll obviously have more to say once I get my hands on it. I did email Valve. I was like, please send me one. So if I get one early, I'll get a video out as quick as possible. If I don't, I'll still get a video out as quick as possible. But the next section to talk about is, of course, the Steam Machine and Steam Frame. They were pretty guarded about talking about it because, of course, they're focusing on the Steam controller, and it still seems like they've got some stuff up in the air. But here's what they had to say about what's going on with those two devices.
Yeah, we don't have exact details about the timeline to share today, and you know, we're hard at work on trying to get them out the door. I think you know, we are definitely expecting to roll out some news soon about that. But in general, I think things is going well. You know, the Steam controller definitely is a building block for something like the Steam Machine, right? The experience of the Steam Machine is gonna, especially for things like Steam Machine Verified and the, you know, the out of box process, definitely is a more seamless experience with the Steam controller. But we definitely expect that the controller is also a product that stands on its own. That's going to have you know, many users that are just normal like PC desktop users, where it'll be a good additive option for them.
Okay, so nothing really that surprising there. They're still trying to figure out the supply chain issues. They're still trying to figure out the RAM issues. They'll get it out as soon as they possibly can. I know that's not the answer that everyone wants to hear, or at least it's not the answer I want to hear. I want them to sound more confident that they're going to get this thing out soon. I understand the logistics of what they're going through. I don't envy them. But we'll talk about this a little bit later in the video. They went through this before with the Steam Deck, and they managed to get that thing out the door with just one delay. I understand that this is a little bit different because the AI companies are directly going for the exact parts that they need, but there's got to be a solution, right? Like, Valve is a company built on solving hard problems. Like, that's how you get a job at Valve, coming up with unique and inventive ways to solve difficult issues. So I think they're going to be able to do it, and they want to get it out quick. I have full faith in them, but I just hope it doesn't take long. And another thing I found interesting was what they had to say when they were asked about separating the launches.
In terms of details about, you know, what's going on with Machine, that's not quite what we're trying to talk about today. But in general, I would say that there's not kind of an arbitrary consideration about, you know, tying product launches together or anything like that. You know, for us, the controller is something that stands on its own, and we want to make sure that we can get that to customers, you know, in parallel to anything that might be happening with Steam Machine, right? I think doing it in the other order would have been harder, right? Like the Machine is harder to ship out without a controller, but the controller is definitely something that you know, we think is going to be primarily used by an audience on you know, normal desktop PC and folks that it's going to be great for Steam Machine, Steam Deck, and all these other things. But at the end of the day, I think the folks that are going to just be getting it to use on their PC are going to be the primary audience for it. And so we want to make sure that we can get it into their hands as soon as possible, as soon as it's ready, basically, without having to wait for any other factors there. But in terms of Steam Machine and stuff, it's really just about the logistics of getting it into users' hands. I think if you've used a Steam Deck docked, the experience is pretty much there, right? It's that plus some more GPU horsepower. Of course, there's a ton of polish and other feature work that we can do, but at the end of the day, the core experience is there. And the key thing that is making it not launched yet is really just about the logistics of finishing it up in terms of supply and getting it to users' hands.
So yeah, they're making it seem like from the jump, they intended on not releasing these things together. Like the Steam controller was always going to come out first. And to be fair to them, they have a good justification for that. Like the audience for the Steam controller is not just Steam Machine users. Like this is, as I said earlier, a controller that's built from the ground up to be the go-to PC controller. And even if they sell the maximum amount of Steam Machines, like every Steam Machine they make get sold, it's still going to be a tiny little percentage of the overall users on PC. So targeting the vast sea of PC users as the main audience for Steam controller makes sense. Like I think they're going to sell a lot of these because having a dockable controller that can just live on your desk that will wake up your PC, hopefully, I mean, that's going to be an easy sell for a lot of people. And even though some people think the price is a little steep, I think when push comes to shove, they're going to sell out of these things when they launch next week. So yeah, I see what they're saying, but I still don't fully believe these things weren't intended to all launch at the same time because they announced them all at the same time. Like the Steam frame could have been ready for a long time before the Steam Machine was ready, or vice versa, or they could have had the controller ready for a long time before these other two pieces of hardware were ready to go. So they clearly announced them all together to make a big marketing splash and potentially release at the same time. At most, I kind of lean towards thinking that maybe they'd split them up by a week at a time, like they'd go controller, machine with controller or without, then Steam frame, so that they don't blow up Steam servers when launching them all at the same time. But yeah, I still believe that these were supposed to all launch close together, but I gotta hand it to them for coming up with a good justification for breaking it up. And they did also talk about the building block scenario where like the first Steam controller and the first Steam machines resulted in Steam OS, which resulted in the Steam Deck, and they fully expect these to result in better iterations down the line. I think that's really cool that they go blip to blip to blip and they take learnings from each hardware launch and influence the next. I don't know what they're going to be able to learn and implement from the controller launch, but I see what they're saying when they talk about it. So that was pretty cool to hear. Speaking of the Steam Deck though, huge shout out to the interviewer from IGN for asking about the stock issues with the Steam Deck. Here's what they had to say about that.
Yeah, we don't really have any specific details to share about that, but it's something we're working hard on. And, as you're aware, there's a lot of considerations right now with respect to shipping being difficult, and also memory shortages and all that. So we've been trying to work through that because we are very cognizant of the fact that there's folks that want to get Steam Deck and they're not currently able to get it. It's available in some regions right now, but in general, it's something that we're working very hard on. We're trying to make sure to keep options open and to work with as many different manufacturers as we can, right? I think in general, that's something that we're doing throughout our hardware design and production phase, where we're always cognizant of the fact that having a single source for a given part would put us downstream of potential shortages and things like that in a way that affects the continuity of the supply and the price for end users. So from the get-go, we've been trying to make sure that we have many options there, and that's been proving really useful in this kind of climate because we can work with all the big players and some of the smaller ones as well. That being said, the conditions around memory are pretty global right now. There's only so much that we can do. But for example, there was a similar condition during, the COVID times where there's a microcontroller shortage, right? And people couldn't really build anything that had, small chips. So every sector from automotive to consumer PCs was affected by that, right? And because we had so many different options open in terms of like putting different types of microcontrollers in there, we were able to navigate that and keep some supply in a climate where maybe some other players were not able to do that. So we expect to be navigating the memory thing the same way.
I'm glad that they acknowledge that they're aware people want to buy these things. That's a good problem to have a 4-year-old device that people still really want to buy. And they are right that it has been going in stock in other countries. We just talked about it here on the channel that they just showed up in Japan. They do show up here in the United States infrequently, but like, I'm also glad that they're working hard to resolve these issues. I thought it was so interesting that they talked about how during COVID, they figured out how to get multiple manufacturers working on multiple parts. So like, if they needed a trackpad from one manufacturer and they were like, the chips and boards that we use for these are used in a car or something, and we've already allocated those to Lexus, they can then go to a bigger or smaller or medium-sized manufacturer and say, hey, can you spin up the machines and get some of these boards for the trackpads made? And then they go, yep, they ship them over, they get the Steam Decks built in out the door. I'm glad that they figured that out with the Steam Deck, because it's no doubt making it easier to get everything figured out with the Steam Machine. Still, I hope they figure out these supply issues sooner rather than later, because not only are they hard to get, they also eliminated the cheap model. So like, the only option is the Steam Deck OLED. I want to see these things back in stock and ready to buy whenever you want, like they were for 3 out of the last 4 years. I understand that it's difficult, but it's a 4-year-old device. Like, there's got to be some middle ground they can find where they can at least keep a few in stock at a time, like have specific days of the week where they go in stock. They can let people know instead of having it be random or scattershot. I understand also that that's to fight scalpers, but like, you need a Steam account to buy these things. So it's a little bit more difficult for scalpers to pick these things up when they're in short supply compared to something like a PS5, a Switch 2, or an Xbox Series X. And then to wrap up the video, a huge shout out once again to the IGN interviewer for asking about the Steam Deck 2.
We're hard at work on it. And obviously every step of the way, like if you look at our hardware projects over the years, there's always, you can draw a straight line from original Steam controller and Steam machines to Steam Deck to everything that we're announcing and shipping this year, right? And we expect Steam Deck 2 will be, a lot of the same, where a lot of what we're doing here will be learnings, that build up to it.
Okay, every time I mention the Steam Deck 2, just going off of what Valve has said, which is exactly what they said now, someone is in the comments or coming at me on Twitter saying that it's a theoretical device, they might not even make it, it's probably never going to happen. This is once again Valve saying that they're hard at work on the Steam Deck 2. They doubled down and said that the Steam Deck 2 is a thing, it exists, they're working on it, it will see the light of day. There will be a Steam Deck 2. I know people are still going to argue with me on it, but I fully believe we will see a Steam Deck 2. I also like, going back to the building blocks thing I talked about earlier, that they're not only going to take learnings from the Steam controller and Steam machine and bake those into the Steam Deck 2. I'm sure they'll get a ton of valuable data, but I know everyone's looking at the Steam frame because it runs on an ARM chip. They're going to get SteamOS ready to go for ARM. I know a lot of people want an ARM powered Steam Deck 2. I would be happy with that. I'd also be happy with an x86 one. I mean, if they look at the landscape and they say, okay, we've got an x86 chip that fits all of our needs, we can get this thing out the door sooner, we can make it a little bit smaller than the Steam Deck 1, I'm fine with them using that. If they look at the landscape and say, oh, we can get a big allotment of ARM chips for this thing, and that'll work just fine as well with our new SteamOS for ARM, I'm fine with that. I want a device that can play games. That's all I really care about. I don't have allegiance to x86 or ARM. And after playing with the Odin and the Thor, I have these devices. I am disappointed with the level of PC game support. If I'm going to play a Steam game, I default to the Steam Deck. Yes, the battery and standby is a little bit longer on the ARM devices, but not by so much where I feel like I absolutely need them. Like, I will be returning the Odin, and I like DS games enough that I'd keep the Thor, but if I leave the house, I don't think either of those devices are coming with me. So I don't have the same feelings about ARM as everyone else. I think it's cool, but it's up to Valve, really. Whatever they go with, I'm fine with. I also have a good enough time emulating emulating on the Steam Deck. I'm playing a lot of PS2 games. I'm playing a lot of PS3 games. I'm playing a lot of Game Boy Advance games, DS games. I don't emulate Switch because I have a Switch 2 and I like buying Switch games for the current hardware. I just have weird feelings about emulating current hardware, and I don't think the experience on these smaller handhelds is any better than what I get out of the Switch 2. I know that everyone is on board right now with this idea of truly portable handhelds that you can fit in your pocket. When I'm at the store or I'm at a coffee shop with my wife or I'm doing something with my wife, I want to be present with my wife. I don't need my phone or video games out at every given second that I have free time. I'm fine just being bored sometimes, right? Like when we're walking around Target looking for groceries or whatever. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Instagram. My phone is in my pocket. I don't even think about it. I know that's a little bit different and some people get totally captured and have short attention spans and stuff. I'm not like that. So I don't need it to be Switch Lite sized. The biggest complaint about the Steam Deck resoundingly from people is that text size is too small in games. I don't run into that on the Steam Deck. I definitely run into it on the Odin and the Thor playing PC games. So I'm fine with a bigger device. I want it to be able to play AAA. A lot of these games that you play on Steam are designed to be played on a bigger monitor or TV anyway. So shrinking them down, truthfully, does nothing for me. I'm fine to have moments of my day where I'm not playing video games, but like, I'm not yucking your yum. If you're not like me, that's fine. I'm assuming that they hear people asking for a Steam Deck Mini. So if the next Steam Deck, the Steam Deck 2 is big, I feel like there is possibility that you will see a Steam Deck Lite. But yeah, this guy interviewing for IGN, doing a great job. I'd like to see more from him. I'd love to interview Valve. I'm just putting it out there. So I don't know how you can contact them if you'd like to see me interview them, but if you have a way, do it and tell them, because that seems to be how this stuff happens. I've emailed them. They answer sometimes, they don't answer others. I have not figured out the way to communicate with Valve, but I would love to talk to them. Let me interview you. I have a journalism degree. I ran the paper for my college. I'm the only single editor-in-chief of my college's newspaper in the entire history that goes back to the 1800s. I wrote for IGN, which I know is not really the best bona fide. I've written for a lot of sites. Like, I'm not just some moron here. I know how to interview. I would do a good job. So there's my humble plea at the end of the video. Anyway, guys, this is the fourth video I'm recording today. There was so much info to get through. I'm going to try to do some shorts, but I'm losing my voice. Thanks for sticking with me and enjoying all this stuff. I really appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter, play some video games. As always, guys, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.